Good morning, all. Happy Monday and happy start of the week. Uh, so, I have a short announcement. I made an exam. The exam is now compiled, and Ansley is working on the exam review on the study guide for you guys. Be patient. It's going to be done today or tomorrow from what I'm gathering from Ansley. Or Ansley, feel free to chime in. When do you think the guide will be ready? She might have stepped out. All right. So are there any questions before I get started with today's lecture? When is the exam? So the exam is next week on Monday. So the exam is going to be available from 9:30 a.m. to um, I forget how many minutes you get on the exam. I think it's like 45 minutes, I believe. So the due date on the exam is going to be like 11:10 a.m. or 11 a.m. So this due date is not for you guys. So you guys are supposed to study, you're supposed to start it at 9:30 a.m. The due date is what it is to accommodate students who need more time. So students who need more time will submit the exam later than 10:20 or 10:45. I'm sorry, 10:15 or 10:20. So the due date is there to ensure that those students do not get locked out of the exam, but do not interpret the due date as literally the due date for everyone. You're supposed to start the exam at 9:30 a.m. Lauren is asking, can you tell us what topic is, do you mean what topics the exam go through? Yeah, Ansley addressed this already. I see it. So Ansley is putting together a study guide for the exam, and all of the topics will be listed. All of the relevant topics for the exam will be listed on that study guide. All right, I'm going to switch to lecture then. So a couple of reminders. As usual, quiz 6 is open and it's due on Friday, this Friday, March 5th. And quiz 7 opens on March 6th or at midnight. Technically, after quiz 6 is due, quiz 7 will open. And quiz 7 is going to be due on next Friday, March 12th. And we have a participation assignment for today. There's 4 questions for 8 points. So make sure you, after the lecture, you go to web courses and take the participation quiz for today. Last time, I did not get through all of the topics regarding about the muscles as I wanted. So I'm going to complete the last Friday's lectures today. So I left off on this slide, which shows basically how muscle cell is stimulated by the neurotransmitters and how basically it contracts. There is also a supplementary video on muscle contractions that you will need to watch in order to pass the quiz, do well on the quiz, as well as it's going to be useful on the exam as well. So what's happening in the muscle? At first, how does it get the signal to contract? So this figure here, if we take a closer look at this picture here, what we will see here that in yellow, there is an axon of a motor neuron. And here, it's a muscle cell. The part of the picture highlighted in blue is basically muscle fiber cell membrane. So the axon, remember the nerve cells, they communicate via electrochemical signals. So electro part comes up until the end of the axon, and the action potential stimulates the release of the vesicles or these bubbles inside the axon filled with some neurotransmitter. So once the vesicles with the neurotransmitters are released into the space in between the end of the axon and the beginning of the muscle cell, the membrane within the muscle cell, it senses the neurotransmitter, and this neurotransmitter triggers the opening of the calcium channels, or proteins embedded in the membrane that uptake calcium, that allow calcium ions to get inside the cell. So once the neurotransmitters are released, the calcium channels within the muscle cell, they open up and allow the calcium ions to get in. So once the calcium ions get in, they cause the change in the shape of the actin protein fiber. Remember, there's two protein filaments or fibers in the muscle that are responsible for muscle contraction. The thin filament is called actin, and the thick filament with these little tentacles is called myosin. So the calcium ions that were let in by the calcium channels embedded in the cell membrane, in a muscle cell membrane, they change the shape of the actin, allowing the tentacles of the that are attached to the myosin grab onto actin. And once these tentacles grab onto from the myosin grab onto actin, they then the tentacles change shape. They kind of pull up, let's say, causing the muscle contraction. So once these tentacles are not under, like, let's say here, the angle between the tentacle and the myosin is about 30 degrees, but it's not always the case. When the muscle contracts, the angle right here would be not 30 degrees, it would be 30 plus, I don't know, 90, let's say. So the angle becomes from sharp to kind of larger. So calcium is very important for muscle contraction because basically it facilitates it by changing the shape of the actin protein filament. So let me look at the chat. I see there are new messages here. Aaron asks, will the exam be in lockdown browser this time? The answer is no. 40 students could not make it work on their computers. So to accommodate everybody, the exam is not going to be on the lockdown browser. But make sure not to leave the browser when you're taking the exam, and start it at 9:30 a.m. Okay, back to the calcium channels and muscle contraction. So these calcium, a fun fact about related to the calcium channels and the muscle contraction, you probably all heard about Botox or botulinum. In fact, the Botox is basically a toxin produced by a Clostridium botulinum. And Botox itself, it's a poison that blocks the release of the neurotransmitters, in the axon into this space between the nerve cell and the muscle cell. So if the neurotransmitter from the nerve cell is not released into the space, the calcium channels will not open inside the calcium channels that are embedded inside the membrane of the muscle cell will not open, and the muscle will not contract. Okay, so if you're getting Botox injection in your forehead, not to not to get the wrinkles, basically you're preventing the muscle contractions in the forehead muscles. What else? Not so fun fact about another thing that is related to the muscle contraction. So a virus that causes polio, it basically causes paralysis of the muscles by destroying the motor neurons. So if the motor neurons are not there to stimulate muscle contraction, the muscle will not contract. So fortunately, there's less and less cases of polio around the world. So, and probably you've all been vaccinated, or most of you, hopefully, have been vaccinated against polio because the virus is still there. It's still like you can go swimming in the river and catch polio. But if you've been vaccinated, you will not, your immune system will fight it off. But if you haven't been vaccinated, then there's, well, probably a substantial risk to you. Polio is not a great disease, as you can tell by its effect, which is killing motor neurons and preventing muscle contractions. So any questions about the mechanism of how neurons stimulate muscle contractions? Okay. So there are two types of muscle fibers. There are so-called slow twitch fibers and fast twitch fibers. Slow twitch fibers, they look smaller if you take a cross section of the muscle and look at it under the microscope. Slow twitch fibers are going to look tighter, okay, smaller, and they will have a different color. They will look redder, more red. And that is because the slow twitch fibers, they have more blood vessels going, more capillaries going through them, and they have more blood supply. And the fast twitch fibers, they look larger, and they look wider. For instance, if you take a chicken and cut it up, you will see that in the chicken thighs, the muscles look redder, and in the chicken breast, the muscles look wider. So in the chicken thighs, the muscle look there's more slow twitch fibers, and in the chicken breast, there are more fast twitch fibers. So the slow twitch fibers, they use energy slowly and have high endurance. And the reason why they have high endurance is basically it's because they have more capillaries, they have higher blood supply, and that there's more blood supply, there's more oxygen, and that there's more oxygen, there's more energy that is produced within the cell. Because remember, oxygen is needed for the respiration. And respiration is basically what provides us with energy, what provides our cells with energy, including the muscle cells. And the fast twitch fibers are large and use bursts of energy and tire quickly. So in the picture here, we see the runner on one side and we see the weightlifter on the other side. So the long distance runner has a high proportion of the slow twitch fibers in the legs, okay, in the leg muscles. And you can basically train if you run marathons, for instance, you can train your muscles to be more to have more slow twitch fibers. So you need to whenever you need to perform work for a long time, you will need these slow twitch fibers to facilitate that. However, if you just need a rapid burst of energy, like for lifting weights, the weightlifter cannot lift weights for 30 minutes. And that's because the weightlifter would grow the fast twitch fibers, and fast twitch fibers do not have as much blood supply to them as the slow twitch fibers. So the fast twitch fibers can perform a large amount of work for a very short period of time. Whereas the slow twitch fibers, because of their increased blood supply, they do not tire as fast, and they are able to perform a substantial amount of, maybe less amount of work, but for a longer period of time. Okay, I have the question here. So how do they work in correspondence to each other? For example, their interaction that happens between the two. There may be some interaction, but I would advise you to look at it as like two contrasting muscle fibers. The slow twitch fibers would sometimes, well, most often the um, like proportion of the slow twitch fiber is higher in one part of the body, and proportion of the fast twitch fibers are higher in another part of the body. So again, I'm going back to the chicken because most of us probably have eaten it at least once, and we know how the meat looks. So the chicken uses its legs much more than it uses its wings. So the chicken breast is basically the muscle that is responsible for wing flapping. Okay, the chicken doesn't fly, and if it flies for very short distances. So the breast muscle of the chicken, it allows the chicken to carry itself, like carry its weight to fly over a fence, and that's it. Okay, it cannot fly away to, I don't know, southern hemisphere or whatever. But the chicken uses its legs much more often than its wings, and that is why in the chicken thighs muscles look darker. They are slow twitch muscles, whereas chicken breast muscles are fast twitch muscles. So chicken thighs, because the chicken uses it a lot, they grow basically more blood vessels inside of the muscles. There are more blood vessels kind of appear inside of the slow twitch muscles, and the appearance of the chicken thighs is darker when you cook it. Uh, so if you are a distance runner but start a lot of weight training and stop running, can you get rid of the slow fibers and replace them with fast ones? Yes, you can. You definitely can. And actually, that's what I'm talking about in my next slide. Uh, like initially, a person can be predisposed to have more slow twitch muscles or more fast twitch muscles. However, you can, through exercise, you can change this proportion inside of your body. So you can choose to do marathon runs, and in this way, your muscles gradually become more and more efficient at performing work. So if you increase your distance as you run and increase your time of running, you literally grow more blood vessels inside your muscles, because the demand promotes the supply of the blood. The demand for the energy, the demand for the oxygen within the muscles promotes the growth of the extra blood vessels or capillaries inside of the muscles, turning them to slow twitch. But if you start weightlifting, um, you perform short bursts of work, of hard work for a limited amount of time, and you literally grow this muscle mass of fast twitch fibers. So what else did I want to say about this? Yeah, so a trained athlete's muscles who they use energy more efficiently because they have more blood supply to them. And a trained athlete, to maintain this strength of muscles, to maintain this efficiency of work, the athlete has to train, has to keep training. Otherwise, if the muscle work is not sustained, then the athlete loses their shape pretty fast. Like aerobic respiration efficiency falls by 50% after the athlete stops training, and blood vessels bring the muscles less oxygen. So I heard someone unmute. Was there a question? Okay, moving on. And the last part that didn't fit into yesterday's and Wednesday's lecture is the integument. The integumentary system comprises approximately 7% of our total weight, and basically it covers the body. Whatever is on the outside of the body is considered to be the integumentary system. So more precisely, there are four parts of the integumentary system. There is epidermis, dermis, the hypodermis, which is not technically part of the skin, unlike epidermis and the dermis, and other structures of the skin. So the first part of the integumentary system is basically, or the first two parts are basically the skin. The skin consists of two parts, the epidermis and dermis. The epi translates from Greek as above. So epidermis is literally translated as above skin, and dermis is like skin. So the skin varies in thickness throughout the varying regions of the body, and it ranges between 1.5 to 44 millimeters. It's the thickest in the places that we use the most. So it's our soles and palms have the thickest skin. Because we are there's high friction usually on those in those areas. So here's a picture of the skin in the cross section and what it looks like, the various structures in it. So here's our epidermis, and the epidermis is the basically the outer layer of the skin, and the dermis is the lower layer of the skin, and hypodermis is the tissues and structures that are located below the dermis, as the name suggests. But the hypodermis is basically what it includes is the blood vessels, the fatty tissue. What else is there? And the connective tissue on the bottom of the dermis. What else? Epidermis contains the layer of the dead cells as well as layer of the live cells, and dermis also contains some blood vessels, some blood capillaries, as well as glands. So glands are part of the integumentary system. We have oil glands that are attached to the hair shafts or the hair structure inside of the skin. We have sweat glands that help us regulate body temperature. And that's it for the glands. Inside of the epidermis, we have cells that are called Merkel cells. Merkel cells are thought to help us with interpreting touch. So as you see, the Merkel cells are connected to the nerve. So whenever those cells are stimulated, they pass the signals, they pass the electrochemical signal to the nerve, and the nerve passes it for interpretation to the brain. Blood vessels in the hypodermis as well as dermis, they help, besides supplying blood, besides delivering the oxygen to the tissues and taking away carbon dioxide, they also help us regulate our temperature. So, by the way, temperature is also, as I mentioned before, another way to regulate the temperature is regulated inside the body is through the sweat glands. Whenever we get too hot, the sweat glands start secreting water. Water and some salt. That helps us cool because the water evaporates from the skin and thus cooling our body. And the blood vessels, the way they help us regulate the temperature is basically they dilate when hot and constrict when cold. Well, not I guess that's not as much of a help with regulating temperature as adaptation to varying temperature. So whenever it's cold, the blood vessels constrict to prevent the heat loss from the tissues, from the blood. And whenever it is hot, the blood vessels dilate I guess I don't have, frankly I don't have a good explanation why they would dilate. Like, it makes sense to me personally that when it's cold they don't want to lose temperature, but when it's hot, like, why would they dilate? You know what, let me follow up with you on that. Okay, so the integumentary system, to reiterate, I didn't have much to say about integumentary system. But to reiterate, the integumentary system consists of skin, hypodermis, which is fatty tissue, connective tissue, and the blood vessels below the skin. It also consists of the hair and the nails. And by the way, the hair and the nails are made up of the protein called keratin, a rough protein called keratin. But so these four parts are basically the part of the integumentary system. So Dylan Bauer says higher surface area to cool down, and that refers to why blood vessels dilate when it's hot. That would make sense to me. Yes, I'll still follow up on that. Not to frankly I'm blanking on it. It's early for me. Okay. So next topic. Are there any more questions before I jump to our next topic, which is the circulatory and respiratory systems? All right, here we go. So the main functions of the circulatory and respiratory system is basically to supply us with oxygen, supply the cells within our bodies with oxygen, and to carry away the toxic CO2 that is a product of respiration. And these two systems basically work together to carry out those functions that are needed by our body. The blood carries around the oxygen as well as other nutrients. And the blood, despite that it looks red, and you may think that the red blood cells and water are the only things that are contained in blood. Despite that the blood is red, it contains much more than just the water and the red blood cells, okay? So basically blood consists of cells and cell fragments, well, red blood cells that are just one type of the cells that are contained in blood, and plasma. So 55% of blood is attributed to plasma, and 45% of blood is attributed to cells and cell fragments. So within those 45% of cell and cell fragments, 95.1% of cells are red blood cells, and this is the reason why the blood is red, but 4.8% are platelets, and 0.01% are white blood cells, okay? And these white blood cells, I'm going to go over the functions of the platelets and white blood cells in a bit. So within plasma, which comprises 55% of blood, 92% of plasma is basically water. 7% are proteins like antibodies and clotting factors. And 1% are salts, wastes, nutrients, hormones, and dissolved gases. Despite that, these only 1% is attributed to salts, waste, nutrients, and hormones. It doesn't mean that they're not important. To give you an example, blood contains about 0.1% of glucose, and very small changes in these in this content can trigger like substantial effects on the body. For instance, if the blood glucose shifts from 0.1% to 0.06%, so 0.04% difference, okay, if it decreases by 0.04%, the body begins to convulse because it doesn't have enough glucose, okay? So it's very small change in nutrients can elicit very drastic response of the body. So, which is to make the point that if only 1% of blood is attributed to salts, wastes, and nutrients, it doesn't mean that these elements are not important. So blood is closely connected to other organ system. It carries gases that are exchanged in respiratory system, and these gases are CO2 and O2. So blood carries CO2 to the lungs to be exhaled, and blood carries oxygen from the lungs to all of the other tissues in the body, because all of the cells need oxygen to get energy through respiration processes. So nutrients enter the blood from the digestive system, uh, and we will talk about it more when we talk about the digestive system. The blood circulates through the kidneys, which eliminate many wastes. So whenever the blood passes through the kidneys, the wastes are sucked out by the kidneys, and basically we pee it out. The blood carries hormones from the endocrine system and participates in immune reactions. So you should already kind of gain appreciation about how blood participates in the endocrine system. Remember that hormones are dumped into the circulatory system, into the blood, and blood carries them to the target cells. If the target cells are all over the body, then those cells all over the body will pick up the hormones from the blood. If the target cells are only in the one gland, for instance, insulin, the blood will, only the cells in the insulin will pick up the hormone, will detect the hormone in the blood. The main function of the red blood cells is to carry oxygen. They are the only cells in the body that express hemoglobin, the little white dots on this picture here. And hemoglobin is a protein that binds to oxygen. I've already mentioned hemoglobin in one of the previous lectures when I talked about the mutations, the DNA mutations. So the example that I gave is the mutation for hemoglobin that causes the molecules of hemoglobin to stick together. And the disease that is caused by the changes by sticky hemoglobin is called oh my goodness. Okay, what is it called? Come on, Sasha. Anybody?
Sickle cell?
Yes, thank you, Madeline. Sickle cell disease. So in sickle cell disease, because the hemoglobin molecules are sticking close together, it causes the shape of the erythrocyte, the red blood cell, or another name for it is erythrocyte, to be different from a healthy one. And because of that, there is some risks for the blood clots, and the oxygen is not carried as efficiently. Okay, so red blood cells originate from stem cells in the red bone marrow, and as they mature, as red blood cells mature, they lose all other organelles and fill up with as much hemoglobin as possible. So technically, the red blood cell is still a cell, but it's tough to identify where's the nucleus, and it's tough to identify where's the mitochondria, and it is because basically the function of the cell is altered, and most of the substance that these cells contain is hemoglobin. The function of hemoglobin is to carry oxygen. Okay. White blood cells, the main function of the white blood cells is to fight infections. The blood contains, Chantel is asking, where do other organelles go? Oh, they're still there, they're just very insignificant. So white blood cells fight infection. Blood contains 5 types of white blood cells, or leukocytes. They are part of the immune system, and they provoke inflammation and destroy microbes, among many other functions. So if you give like urine, if you take a urine test and the technician sees leukocytes or white blood cells in the urine, that means that there is infection somewhere in the urinary tract or in the kidneys. If there are high levels of the white blood cells in the blood, that means there's infection somewhere in the body. So for instance, a quick test for appendicitis, at least like in the country I came from, was to test the blood for leukocytes. So if you have like appendicitis appendicitis symptoms, and the doctor suspects the appendicitis, which requires surgery, they will test your blood for leukocytes and or white blood cells, and if the content of the white blood cells in the blood is through the roof, then the doctor will say, yeah, it's probably appendicitis. Let's cut you up. So in the disease called leukemia, there is an overproduction of white blood cells at the expense of the red blood cells. And although white blood cells by themselves are not bad, they're helping us to fight infections. If there is an overproduction of the white blood cells at the expense of the red blood cells, as you can guess, the oxygen supply to the cells around the body will be limited. And having too few of the white blood cells is also not great, because we need the white blood cells to fight off infection. So people who are HIV positive and who develop AIDS, they basically, the HIV virus attacks the white blood cells, so causing the white blood cells count to plummet. And if we don't have white blood cell, because the HIV infected people eventually have very low, if they are not treated, of course, have very low white blood count cells, then they're susceptible to infection and pick up infections that the healthy people just fight off. And those basically, the increased susceptibility to infections is what, and cancer, by the way, is what is called AIDS, or acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So technically, HIV virus does not kill people. The AIDS kills people, or the lack of the white blood cells in the body kills people, or rather, infections kill people. Okay. So Christine asked, is low white blood cells also called autoimmune disease? No. So Ansley answered that. Autoimmune disease happen when your white blood cells attack. Yep. Okay, Ansley covered it. So good job. And finally, platelets are the third type of the cells that is contained in the blood. The platelets help the blood clot. They are small, colorless cell fragments that initiate blood clotting when there is a wound. And I already touched upon it when I covered the positive feedback in the system, in our system. When, for instance, we cut ourselves, the platelets help the blood, help the clot the initial hole in the blood vessel so that we don't bleed out. And that's exactly what it says on the slide. Great. Okay. Are there any questions? I see Dylan turn his camera on. Does it mean that you want to ask a question, Dylan? Nope. Okay. Well, good to see somebody as a change. Okay. Any questions so far? So blood can, you probably have heard or participated in blood donations, and it's literally exactly what it sounds like. You may donate the whole of your blood, and usually you can donate 450 to 500 milliliters. And it's a good thing to donate your blood because people frequently need transfusions after trauma or surgery, and they rely on the donated blood. Um, More commonly, though, whenever your blood is donated, it's separated into its components. It's separated into red blood cells, platelets, and clotting proteins. And these different components are then used for other purposes. Another option is plasma donation. So plasma is really not donating your blood, but only this liquid part. And so plasma, basically machine separates plasma from blood, and red blood cells and other components are returned to your own body. So you don't lose your red blood cells and other cells from your body. They're returned to you, but the liquid part is donated. So
I am
yeah.
sorry. I actually donated plasma. I think like I want to say a year or two ago, and it was really bizarre watching everything being pumped back. I
Yeah.
was just like, I was almost rather uncomfortable because I was just like, okay, so now there's just liquid getting pumped back in my body. Don't really know what it is. It was funny in the moment, but it was a little weird. It was a lot more involved than donating blood.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you did a good thing because, well, plasma helps treat like hemophilia, hepatitis, and other diseases. Like within plasma, there are antibodies, and these antibodies are useful for people who don't like. If you got sick with something, for instance, in COVID, one of the ways people are treated with COVID-19 from COVID-19 is by plasma of people who already recovered. So plasma contains antibodies that help fight whatever virus is is causing trouble in another person's body. So in the US, it is illegal to pay a donor for whole blood. But it is legal to pay for plasma. So if somebody offers you money for your blood, know that it is not legal. And basically, it's illegal to prevent people donating blood too much. You need your blood, like you need the cells to carry oxygen and to fight off your infections. And you basically, if you donate blood, you feel pretty tired afterwards, and you need a week or so to recover for your body to reproduce to replenish all of the cells that you lost. And if you donate it too frequently, your body becomes weaker, and that shouldn't be. To be incentivized donating blood too frequently, it became illegal in US to donate blood. But plasma is, you can get money for plasma donations, and that's because all of your cells, basically, it's less dangerous, it's less taxing for the body, because all of the cells are returned back to the body, and you donate only the liquids, which contains the good stuff like antibodies and clotting factors. Okay, so I see another thing in chat, question in chat, but they give gift cards and such to people who donate. Yeah, I thought any sort of compensation was illegal. Like for plasma, it's fair game, but if they offer it for blood, like I thought it's
Well,
illegal
there
to.
was a scholarship at my school, Park Vista, located in Palm Beach County. Is if through One Blood, I actually tried to do it because I turned 16 in sophomore year. Is if you donated your blood, X amount of times during high school, you could get a scholarship. Sorry,
No,
you
that's
c-
fine.
you could get a scholarship via donating blood.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
I thought that was always interesting because, think of the people who would donate their blood for money, and if they
Yeah,
had to, in that kind of realm of
that's interesting and borderline sketchy in my opinion.
yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, you could
Although
get
they,
it.
they do it right. You can't go like since the events are limited in how far they're spaced apart, they know for a fact that your body has a chance to replenish because you have to do it through the high school. You
Right.
can't go out and just go to, any one Bud Plus, like, try to like get her done in the senior year and donate blood an extra time. Like that would be terrible.
Well,
You can't
probably
do
won't
that.
won't survive that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Sydney says that they give food, yeah, but the food is kind of a necessity. You feel very weak after blood donation, and you need this energy to get you home, at least. Um, so Matthew says, I donated blood to the Red Bus a few weeks ago, and we got a free shirt and a voucher for a gift card to wherever we choose. Hmm. Yeah, I thought the food was fine, but the voucher and a gift card, uh, yeah, sketchy. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
was in the class after the first time I donated blood. In the class after, um my mom my mom has thyroid. You know how we were talking about thyroid, so my mom goes through hot flashes, etc., all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I was in class and I just donated blood, and I was getting really hot and really cold. I'm like, what the heck is going on? I eventually I was like, put two and two together, and I was like, oh, I donated blood, but I was like, why am I having hot flashes? I'm not, you know,
Yeah, it was scary about it.
hopefully I don't have thyroid like my mom.
All right. Well, thanks for that. That was a good break. Uh, okay, and let's go back to our topic. So we have 7 minutes left, which is great. So the blood is carried. The blood is contained inside the blood vessels, and the blood vessels are classified by the direction of the blood flow. In the picture here, the red blood vessels contain the oxygen-rich blood. Are all of them? Well, no. Actually, that's the wrong way to put it. The red blood vessels carry the blood from the heart to the cells, to the yeah, to the target cells, and the blue blood vessels carry the blood from the target cells to the heart. The reason I was tempted to classify the blood in a different way was because the way I remembered it initially from like grade school, which was incorrect, was that the vessels colored in red contain oxygen-rich blood, and the vessels colored in blue contain oxygen-poor blood. But that is a wrong way to remember it, because it is partially true, but it becomes a reverse when we are talking about the pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. So the blue vessel that goes that is connected to the heart and the lungs, like the vessel covered in blue actually carries the oxygen-rich blood into the heart. And the red blood vessel that goes from the heart, that is connecting the heart and um, the um, the lungs, it carries oxygen-poor blood. So the correct way to remember the difference between the blue vessels and the red vessels is that red vessels carry the blood from the heart to to the target cells, and the blue vessels carry the blood from the target cells to the heart. So the direction with respect to heart matters. The direction of the blood flow with respect to heart matters, not the oxygen enrichment of the blood. The tiniest blood vessels inside of the body, and I've mentioned this several times already, the term itself, not the explanation, are called the capillaries. So the capillaries, water and dissolved substances diffuse between the capillary and the interstitial fluid that bathes the body's cells. So essentially, we see here the capillaries uh, between, we see here the capillaries and the schematics of how gases dissolve from how gases are exchanged between the blood cells, through the capillaries, and between the target cells. So this is the smallest capillary. Okay, it carries the blood, and the oxygen gets out of the blood because there is higher oxygen content inside the capillary at some point compared to the surrounding tissues. So that is why the oxygen by diffusion move down the gradient of its concentration. And at the same time, the CO2 concentration is usually higher on the outside of the capillary than the inside of the capillary. So CO2 basically enters into the blood and is carried to the eventually to the lungs, first to the heart and then to the lungs. Okay, so what is delivering? Apart from the blood vessels, we need the heart for the blood to be delivered all around the body. Okay, so the heart is basically a muscular pump that helps the blood to get around. The heart consists of the two atria and two ventricles. So we have four chambers within the heart. The blood that has given out, that has been all around the body, and given out the oxygen and picked up the carbon dioxide from all around the tissues, from the tissues all around, basically accumulates eventually in the superior vena cava. So the blood is carried towards the heart, okay? And from superior vena cava, the blood gets into the right atrium. From the right atrium, the blood gets into the right ventricle. And now you see in the ventricles, the ventricles are lined with the muscular tissue. And the contraction of these muscular tissue provides this pump action of the blood. So from the ventricles, blood is pushed into the tissues all around, into the vessels all around the body. So these contractions need to be strong. Well, actually, I will get to it later. What I want to say next. Anyway, so after this oxygen-poor blood gets into the right ventricle, the ventricle contracts and pumps the blood into the pulmonary artery. And the pulmonary artery goes, as the name suggests, it goes into the lungs. In the lungs, the blood gets enriched with oxygen and returns to the heart, into the left atrium of the heart. So this oxygen-rich blood will get into the left ventricle from the left atrium, and the ventricle will contract and send and produce like this massive pump, okay? And as a result, the blood will get into our aorta and be distributed all around the body, all around the tissues that need oxygen for their energy production. You will see that the muscle lining in the right ventricle and the left ventricle differs. The left ventricle appears to have much more muscle compared to the right ventricle. And the reason for that is that the right ventricle doesn't need to contract with the same force as the left ventricle, because the right ventricle just needs to contract strongly enough to send the blood to the lungs. But the left ventricle needs to contract strongly enough to send the blood all around the body, but the lungs. Okay, and this left ventricle needs more muscle. So like we basically that is the reason why we have more muscles in the left ventricle than in the right ventricle. Okay. Do we have questions about this mechanism of blood flow? Okay, so the left or right sends the blood to the whole body. Instead of answering just that part of the question, I'll go over it once again. So the oxygen for blood from the whole body is collected into the superior vena cava. It drains into the right atrium, and eventually it gets into the right ventricle. Now here in this part, the blood is oxygen poor. And think oxygen poor blood needs oxygen, so it needs to be pumped inside the lungs. So right ventricle contracts and sends the blood to the lungs. The oxygen-rich blood then comes from the lungs into the left atrium and drains into the left ventricle. Now think oxygen-rich blood doesn't need to go to the lungs, because the function of the lungs is to enrich our blood with oxygen. Oxygen-rich blood needs to go all over the body to supply oxygen to the cells all over. So the left ventricle will contract and send the oxygen all around the body. Okay, and it's 10:22, we're past our end time. Thanks for joining in, and I'll allow any last minute questions if anybody has them. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on Wednesday.